The bridge was there. He could see it. A mile out, maybe less. The span ran straight across the water, solid and dark against the grey morning. He had crossed it 1,000 times. The signal was green. Everything looked the way it always did. But alignment is not the same as contact. The locomotive left the yard at 5:43. The engineer had been running this route for 11 years. He knew every grade, every curve, every bridge between the terminal and the coast. This morning was no different. Low clouds, calm water, the kind of visibility that made distances hard to judge but never caused concern. The bridge appeared in the windscreen 2 miles out, a swing span over a shipping channel. It opened to let vessels pass, then closed and locked before trains were cleared. He had waited for it before, watched the deck rotate back into place, heard the heavy mechanical thump when it seated. But this morning, the signal upstream was green. The bridge was closed, or it appeared to be. He nudged the throttle forward slightly. The train was light. 4 passenger cars, a mail car, nothing unusual. Speed was under 40. The bridge grew larger in the frame of the glass. He could see the rails continuing across it. The geometry looked right. The span was aligned. There was no reason to slow. He glanced at the pressure gauge, checked the water level. Normal. The next station was 8 miles beyond the bridge. They would arrive on time. The rails hummed beneath him. From a distance, a movable bridge span can appear seated even when it is not. The human eye fills in the gap. The brain expects continuity. When the rails are visible on both sides of the span and the angle of approach is shallow, the mind completes the image. The bridge looks whole. This is not illusion in the supernatural sense. It is geometry. The far edge of the span may be only inches away from contact. From half a mile, that distance is invisible. The rails appear to meet. The deck appears level. The shadows align. There is no visible break. He had no reason to doubt what he saw. The signal was green. The bridge was in position, or it seemed to be. And by the time the error became visible, it would be far too late to matter. The locomotive was heavy. Momentum at 38 miles per hour does not stop quickly. Even with full braking, the train would continue forward for hundreds of feet. The bridge was now less than a mile ahead. The water beneath it was grey and still. He leaned forward slightly, watching the track. Nothing appeared wrong. The signal system at the bridge was mechanical. It operated on position, not alignment. The span was considered closed when it rotated into its designated position. Locking pins dropped into place when the deck reached a certain angle. If the pins engaged, the signal upstream turned green. This was the design. It had worked for years. But seating and locking are not the same thing. The span could be locked without being seated. The pins could engage even if the far edge of the deck had not made full contact with the approach rails. There was tolerance built into the system. A gap of inches, sometimes more. The bridge was considered safe when the mechanical interlocks reported closure. Whether the rails actually met was a separate question. No alarm sounded, no flag dropped. The system saw a closed bridge. The engineer saw a closed bridge. The signal was green. He did not reduce speed. The locomotive continued forward. The bridge was now a quarter mile ahead. The water was 30 feet deep. The span was 150 feet long. From this angle, it looked like every other morning. The sound of the rails changed first. A subtle shift in pitch. The vibration through the frame of the locomotive became uneven. He noticed it but did not react immediately. Small changes in track were common. Joints, expansion gaps, nothing that required attention. Then he saw the shadow. Not a shadow on the bridge, a shadow under it, a line of darkness where there should have been solid deck. Thin, maybe 2 inches wide, visible only because the angle had changed. He was close enough now to see the seam. He reached for the brake. His hand moved without hesitation, but the train was already committed. The momentum carried it forward. The wheels screamed. The bridge was 50 feet ahead, then 20. The rails did not meet. The span was locked. The pins were engaged. The signal was green. But the far edge of the movable deck had not seated flush with the approach rails. There was a gap, small enough to be invisible from a distance, large enough to matter. A swing bridge operates on a central pivot. When the span rotates into the closed position, the outer edges must seat against fixed approach rails on either side. This requires precise alignment. The span must be level. The pivot must be centered. The locking mechanisms must engage only when the geometry is correct. But machinery wears, pivots shift, tolerances expand. Over time, a span can lock into position even when the seating is incomplete. The pins drop, the signal clears. The system reports that the bridge is safe. And in most cases, it is. A gap of 1 or 2 inches may not be enough to derail a slow-moving freight car. The weight presses the span down. The wheels cross. The train continues. But this train was moving faster, and the gap was wider than usual, and the lead axle of the locomotive struck the misaligned edge of the span at an angle that lifted it slightly, just enough to break contact with the rail. The bridge had been locked, the signal had been green, everything had worked as designed. But design assumes conditions that do not always hold. After the investigation, the bridge was rebuilt. New tolerances were written into the specification. Sensors were added to measure seating, not just position. The signal logic was changed. A green light now required more than mechanical engagement. It required contact. But these changes came later. The engineer had done nothing wrong. He had followed procedure. He had trusted the signal. He had crossed the bridge 1,000 times. There was no reason to believe this morning would be different. And from his position, a mile out, the bridge had looked exactly the way it was supposed to look. The lesson, if there is one, is not about error. It is about assumption. Systems are built on the belief that certain conditions will hold, that spans will seat flush, that locking means contact, that what appears correct is correct. And most of the time, these assumptions are justified. But not always. The bridge is still there, trains still cross it, the channel still opens for ships, and every time the span rotates back into place, it seats with a heavy, final sound, metal on metal, alignment confirmed. But for a long time after, engineers slowed when they approached, not because they were told to, but because they had learned that permission is not the same as safety, and that a green signal only means the system believes the path is clear.